Welcome to the session. It's a support program for postgraduate students in terms of writing up your research. Our service doesn't quite replace your supervisor. It is actually supplementary to what your supervisor and your lecturers are offering. In other words, as you are doing your research module, if you get stuck while waiting perhaps to contact your lecturer or give your submission to your lecturer, you are free to contact us for a feedback, advice, or just for somebody to check your work and tell you whether you're on the right track or not. Our role is more advisory, and your supervisor has priority in whatever that you do. So what we do also is that we offer one-on-one consultations. If you feel there's a section of your assignment, in your case, I think you write assignments. If there's a section in your assignment, a topic you're not sure about, or perhaps you've already written something about on it, and you want someone to have a look and advise you whether your response is on track, you can email us. You can email me using the email that I used in the invitation, and I will forward your request to Dr. Korombi. Dr. Korombi is our independent contractor. He's not based in the university, but he works with us. We are, and this academic program is one of those services. So basically, that's our service in a nutshell. If you get stuck, you know that there's a shoulder to cry on. Drop us an email. No question is too much or too trivial or whatever. Whatever you're not sure about, drop us an email, and then I will forward it to Dr. Korombi. You can also write directly to him. He needs to just update us that Busisiwe has contacted me on this and this and that. So that's the service. I don't know if he has any question.
Okay, no, it's fine. Thank you so far.
All right. Yeah, you're welcome then.
I think we did two sessions that focused on the concept and the research processes. Very basic, the introductory part that introduces most of us into research. Actually culminated at us focusing on one of the research methods, which was a focus group. And there, what we did was to look at what literature says, and then I presented an example to give an opportunity to researchers, participating researchers, to see how I did it practically, because the workshop was presenting theory. Then I said, let's mix theory and practice. And I think Lindelwa did good work. She's the one who advised that if we use examples, it brings us closer to each other, and it brings people closer to what is practice than what is theory, because everybody can read theory. But in this workshop, I think it's an opportunity to see how we can translate theory into practice. Because at the end of the day, when one has to conduct research, that person is actually doing work in the field, is pursuing a research or implementing a research project after having completed a research proposal. So that is the approach that we used, and I do believe that even today, you will see here under the introductory part that the focus, the approach would be, we will use one of the case studies, and today's case studies is the role of Venda culture in nature conservation, a case study of the inhabitants of the Chivasa area. And I completed this report in 2001. And the reason why I use it today as an example is because the material that I'm using today is also using survey as an example of a data collection method. So luckily, I did something which is closer to survey, and I wanted to show how I've done this. And I just went to specific sections of that report, took what would be relevant to sections that I'm presenting here. so that you and I and many more others who would join could see, oh, now literature saying this, and let's just see what the researcher did in the field. We will look at that, then it gives us an opportunity to critically say, no, man, but literature said this, and we see there is no alignment, there's misalignment, because the actual research or the project did not go in accordance with with what literature said. Then we can take it from there. Why do we think there's a deviation, whether there is a shortcoming, or it is because the researcher wanted to achieve specific objectives. And this is how we would approach the presentation even today. And during the presentation, you are allowed to stop me so that we can discuss. And by the way, I get bored when I talk alone, and it's so boring. The other time I could even present 70 slides, and I think people get tired that I was just flooding a lot of information on them. And this is the reason why this time we will not do that. We will rather do less, but ensuring that we all move together, we understand the concept being presented. Let me give you another opportunity if you want to make comments before we can continue with this session.
Okay, no, I'm not one. I'm not a person of many words. I prefer to listen and take notes. But if at any point I find that I'm confused or not understanding of what it is you're sharing, then I'll be sure to pose a question. But otherwise, I'm more of a listener, and yeah, I prefer to write notes.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. But do assist me that I don't talk alone. So otherwise, I like to facilitate than dictating, presenting, throwing things onto people. I like engagement.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. I'll move to the next slide. That shows the content of the presentation. We'll look at two types of data. We will also look at how we develop data collection instruments, and we'll specifically focus on developing a questionnaire as an example. And then we'll go to interviews as a data collection method or technique. Then we would look at structured and unstructured interviews. Then we would move away and go down and see, look at the situation, what happens during face-to-face interview when the interviewer and the interviewee are actually interacting. In other words, the person who's collecting data and the respondent. That interaction we'll look at because it has got specific challenges. And these face-to-face interviews also provide us with opportunities that are not there with other data collecting techniques. We'll look at that, then you will see how I used an opportunity, or even if there are shortcomings, if they are there, I'll be able to point out that here, I see that even if I've passed, I've completed the report, it was marked correct by the university and external examiners as well as the supervisor, it still has some gaps that I can identify today. I will try to do that. But also be on the alert, because I also want to see if you are actually moving with me and understanding. And from time to time, when I see you don't say anything, I'll pause. Then I'll even ask questions. Then the last thing, I said, we look at the questionnaire design. Maybe I might have also made an error. You see, the certain statement is developing data collection instruments. The other one says questionnaire design. We will see how this differs. If it confuses, then I'll reword. Then we can correct it there. Let's move now. Survey research design is said to be a very old approach of conducting research. And people link it back in olden days during the biblical times. Now here we hear that ancient Egyptians used it to reach conclusions on how to govern their land. In other words, to determine the governance model on how they can improve governance. Then survey research was conducted to advise on that one. And the Greeks also used it to obtain a feel for political tension on the ground. Still the same, this is a political thing, like what the Egyptians did. But also Karl Marx used it differently in terms of determining labor relations between employees and the employers. He issued questionnaires to workers to ascertain whether employees were being mistreated and exploited by their employers. So you could see that survey research was used in different circumstances and for different purposes. But even then, the people only use it in 4 areas. As we see in this slide, it was used to gain information on demographic characteristics of a certain group of people, or to gain information on the social environment in which they function, their activities, and their opinions and attitudes concerning certain matters. You see, but the world has changed now, and survey research is used broadly and in a number of ways and in fields. That is why here we hear that it is used now in fields such as accounting. In music, it is used. It's also used in nursing, and there are many more other areas where survey research is used. Now, there are 2 types of data that can be gathered through the use of survey research. And the 2 types of data, the first one is quantitative, the other one is qualitative. Quantitative and qualitative data is collected when people are using qualitative and quantitative variables respectively. Now, there is a difference here. The people that are that were known to use quantitative to collect data from quantitative variables were mainly in the natural sciences. Here they give an example of physics and engineering. People that usually focus on quantitative variables. But today, social sciences are also using quantitative variables. And here we will later on see what type of variables are there that qualitative, that social researchers use in the collection of data. Let's first look at what the natural sciences focus on. Their variables are mainly in mass, which is weight, distance, time, and more. But the social sciences would use variables such as income, such as fertility rate, and education level. In the forthcoming slides, I will be able to show how I collected quantitative data. And I've just identified some of the variables, and we will be able to discuss. And I use very simple examples so that I don't confuse anybody. I have, for an example, under the topic that I mentioned earlier on, the role of vendor culture in nature conservation, and I had developed questions that were quantitative. I've got question 8 and 9 here. Let's forget about question 8 for now, but look at question 9. That asked people about their income. And the question was worded like, it was in appendix 1, and I do have this appendix attached to the research report that I submitted for the specific qualification for which the research project was meant. Now, the question read like, which amount of money do you get per month? In other words, I wanted to determine the income that each individuals that participated in the research project did get. And then I gave them options, and there were 5 options. The first one is those that receive less than 200 would be marked 1. In other words, if a respondent is indicating that he gets less than 200, then I will cycle that numerical number 1. If it is 201 to 499, it will be 2. 500 to 999, it will be 3. 1000 to 1999, it will be 4. And the last one, which is 2000 and above, would encircle 5. So, in other words, this was a tool for gathering data, and this is how I gathered the data. So remember, we said we're talking here about 2 types of data, and here we're looking at quantitative data. Quantitative data is numerical in character. It is something that can be measured and it can be counted, and this can be converted into statistical analysis. Data can be captured and be analyzed through statistical tools. But later on, I'll indicate to you that I did not even use any tool. I used very simple tool. I did not subject this to complex statistical analysis when I analyzed data. Let's go down and see how this data was analyzed.
Dr. Korombi?
Yes.
If I may ask, as a student now, while you're on that slide, you have, which amount of money do you get per month? And then you say less than 200. Then if I'm earning exactly 200, where do I fit in there? Because now you haven't given me an option to choose. If I'm earning exactly 200 and not 201.
It means there was an error when I constructed this question. I see it now. There was an error. Because I said less than 200. I did not start at 200. I just said less than 200, then 200 and above. Yes. But maybe, I don't know why I did that. I would have been forced to defend this if I was questioned by a supervisor. So let us say this would confuse a respondent, and let's mark it and let's agree. And I want what is the name of the researcher that is participating here?
We have Busisiwe.
Busisiwe, I want you to indicate if you follow what Lindelwa is actually asking, because she noted an error here in the manner in which I crafted the questionnaire. And later on, Lindelwa, I would indicate how we deal with correcting errors on questionnaires. And I will show you the steps that I followed. Then we can even come back to this and see if indeed that process did take care of this or not. Busisiwe, do you follow what the question was, and do you see where the error is now here?
Yes, 100% according to her explanation. Yes. I do see it. I picked it up.
Okay, but the others, do you follow the way in which the question was crafted and how people were expected to respond?
Yes, I do.
So this is the simplest way of collecting data. And I noted that generally most of the people want to use survey, even if they don't understand it. I will show you later on when we engage in other workshops. I'll show you which methods I prefer, and I will tell you why. I think they are less complex than a survey. But let's go to the next slide, having noted that. Thank you, Lindelwa, for that noticeable error. Now, look at how I analyzed that data. Now, remember, the data was numerical. It was measured. It could be counted. But look how it was interpreted. You see, I said when I interpreted. Actually, the other thing that I must mention is that you will not see the responses that I received. I don't know if that is a gap or it is not a gap. I don't know if I should have captured and have also recorded them, because they are not even there in the report that I have. But I did work on the scribes that I had, on the documents that I had. I was using to write all the responses. I worked out, I recorded everything, and later on worked, did the data analysis, and the results is what I'm presenting in here. And here it says, generally, the sample represents a low-income sector of the population because only 35 of the respondents were employed. Of these, 66% were laborers, and 17 were professionals, and 17 were self-employed. You could see now that now I put responses in percentages, but I am also using the narrative, the statements, words. Generally, look, my words are generally, I put a sentence. I don't just put numbers or percentages. I just say, generally, the sample represents a low-income sector of the population. And then I indicate all the different percentages in the way that data was captured and the responses, based on the responses that were received. And if I go down here, I also explain that laborers and the self-employed received the lowest income, which were 200,000 per month. I don't know if this is correct or it is still an error. Laborers and self-employed, but professionals received from 2,000 and above per month. Oh, let's take it as the truth. Because the sample included people above the age of 55 years, who were 45% of the people that responded. Some of the income respondents received, some of the income respondent received was what they had received as pensions. In other words, there were people who were not employed, but they were also not self-employed. And how did they get the income? It was through pension grants. So this is how data was interpreted. But all of these is emanating from quantitative data. And later on, I think we will be able to see how questions were worded, how qualitative questions were worded, and how they were interpreted. So this will be able to show us that there is indeed a difference between quantitative measures and the qualitative measures. Oh yes, I still have another quantitative question here. And the reason why I've got this one, I just wanted to demonstrate another way in which I interpreted the data. You could see that I have presented data in a table format. There you would see, sorry, maybe I must read the question first. Is overpopulation a problem in your village? People have to say yes or no, or they don't know. Then we, after having received the responses and having entered them, captured them, then this is how it was analyzed. It says, table 2.21 is perception of overpopulation as a problem. And we've got a column that has got responses, the other one leaders, healers, villagers, and the last one is the total that we have. You could see that we've got different responses from different respondents. You've got leaders that have got nothing in terms of the yes. No one said yes from the leaders, in other words. But the healers have got one who said yes, villagers 21, and the no's from leaders are 8, from healers are 13, and villagers 51. The don't knows, leaders still don't have anything on the don't knows, but the healers have got 2 and the villagers 4. And when we look at the totals there, the final percentages there, it was for the 22% in combination, and the no's is 72%, and don't know is 6%. And the interpretation here is that although I had a perception that overpopulation might have been a problem in the area where these studies was conducted, the responses of no show that no, it is not true that overpopulation was perceived as a problem, and therefore it shows that I should indeed not put my preferences up front of the preferences of the respondents, because that would even mislead. The reality is that the area is perceived not to have a problem of overpopulation. So let's move away. I just wanted to show that I've used simple statistic or simple calculations of data analysis without subjecting my results in my data into very heavy data analysis, statistical analysis. Let's go and see how this was. Okay, I want to make comment now here. Overall comment when I was preparing this presentation. I said the values were recorded in terms of the respective responses from interviewees or respondents. Okay, that is correct. I've already mentioned that. Such values were the ones to be captured during data capturing to facilitate statistical analysis. Yes, it is true. The researcher did not use complex statistical analysis tools beyond a calculator. I've already said all this. But I said, note well, it should be noted that the questions did not have instructions, as the interviewer was the researcher himself. In some cases, especially in areas where organizations are conducting huge surveys, they employ researchers or field workers. These are the people who go out. If they are doing face-to-face interviews, they are the people that meet respondents. They meet people to be interviewed. And with that approach, you need to give specific instructions to the interviewers, and the instructions are sometimes written even on the questionnaire, so that there's going to be a standard way of asking questions. This ensures that every interviewer will ask a question in the way that other interviewers have asked. And this ensures that there is no bias in collecting data, and that there is no misinformation that is being collected. The information collected will always be in line with the objectives of the study or of the research. I wanted to hear if Busisiwe does understand this. And now here, you see, for academic purposes, in most cases, you find that the researcher himself or herself is the one that collects data. In other words, a single individual will collect data. Here, I interviewed 100 respondents, and I had to travel every day to rural areas to go and collect data. I had to meet each of the 100 respondents and to ask them all the questions which were in the questionnaire. And because it was myself, I had a good background of the study problem, or the study hypothesis, or the study topic, and I knew everything about. I had literature background, was done by me. Everything was done by me, and the research proposal was done by me. Therefore, when I went to the field, there was no need to write instructions for myself. Then I successfully completed the research project. And I just want to pause here and give an opportunity to Busisiwe if she can make a comment also.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, in terms of how you compiled your research, why do you not refer to yourself as you did not use these complex statistical analysis? Why do you have to put it as the researcher? Like, why don't you refer to yourself as like, I did not use complex statistical analysis?
Okay. Right, it's okay. You see, this comment that I'm making here are not from the study report. I made these comments, it might be 2-3 days ago, but I wanted to make sure that I don't forget these statements so that I can share them with you. And it sounds very professional. If you don't refer yourself in the report, I never used I said the researcher, because there I want to be professional. And Yeah, I don't know why, but professionally, I haven't seen a lot of people saying I. They say the researcher, they project, they research this research project, and it sounds more professional.
Okay, all right.
Yes, and I think the protocol is we avoid using this she, he, me, her. I don't know. I saw somewhere where they discourage it. We will look at it when we look at how we record reports and we do literature survey. I don't know if it is not there, but it should be there. If it is not there, we will investigate and find out how we can come across something that advises us on how to use the she and the his.
Okay.
Let's go to the next slide. Now, we're going now to look at qualitative data. And here, I also expect that I should have put another example on how I collected qualitative data. And this is one of the questions that was posed. It was posed to the traditional healers. And as part of the background, when I designed these questionnaires, there were 3 sets of questionnaires. Later on, I will show it in one of the slides. I knew that I was going to research on the Venda culture and nature conservation. And then the potential respondents would be ordinary people, the villagers, or the people, ordinary people. But there are traditional leaders because it is in the rural area. And I know that they've got certain responsibilities vested onto them in terms of our culture or in terms of the Chivenda culture. And in there, amongst the inhabitants, I also know that there are traditional healers, and that traditional healers have got a specific role in the community. Their role is different from the role of the leaders, and they are prominent. They are not taken as ordinary citizens or inhabitants of a specific village. So as a result, I had 3 sets of questions. The one that goes to traditional healers, the one that goes to healers, and the one that goes to the ordinary inhabitants. And you will be able to see the outcomes of the investigation based on the types of questions that we asked and the types of questionnaires that were there. So this is an example of a qualitative question. It is aimed at the traditional healer. It says, and it was focusing on land, conservation of land. It says, as a traditional healer, what is your role in promoting land conservation? This question requires a description or a discussion of the respondent's role in land conservation. It does not require a respondent or a traditional healer to present numbers. So the response, I expect that the responses would not be measurable in quantitative values. In quantities, it cannot be measured, but it can be described. This is because the researcher is interested on more details about the behavior. You see now, the behavior is not quantitative, it's qualitative. This is the behavior of the traditional leader, which is qualitative. Now, let's see how they've responded. This is when I was analyzing on section 4, where I had data analysis. Then I entitled the heading. There was a subheading. There were 2 subheadings. The other one is, there were 3, data analysis. Then the subheading is cultural perceptions and conservation of land. And this was with respect to question 1.4, which says the role of traditional healers in promoting land conservation. And I think we have seen it earlier on. Then the responses were like this. This is me now writing. Although about a quarter of healers indicated that they played no part in promoting the maintenance of land, the majority reported that they indeed played a role in promoting land conservation. A quarter says that they played no part, but the majority said they do. And here I don't put the number. But what did they say? They said that they performed rituals such as Uzibera Shango. This is a customary practice, cultural in the Chivenda culture, Udzivera Sango is a practice of using medicine to protect a territory against natural disasters, because there is a belief that natural disasters do come, and if they come, they like the hurricanes, like the cyclones, they damage the land, they damage the territory. People cannot plow, cannot keep animals, people cannot live, their properties will be damaged. So they have got traditional healers who they use, because in each chief scroll, every leader does have a traditional leader who is used from time to time. And here they use them to perform this ritual. This is what the traditional healers responded. They also went on that they were instructed to do this by the traditional leader. The traditional leaders who wanted to ensure that the soil would be productive when it came to the plowing season. Traditional leaders thought that they contributed to land conservation by replacing soil after digging out medicinal plants and by applying crop manure for the fertilization of their fields. They argued that the replacement of soil helps trees and plants to survive, and that this in turn promotes the protection of soil. Traditional leaders also discourage members of the tribe from cutting down trees that are not used for medicine. This, they believed, showed that they recognized the role that vegetation plays in soil conservation. This is an account of the response. It means they gave a mouthful, and this is referred to as qualitative. And Busisiwe, if you have got a comment again.
No, I don't have anything to ask so far.
But you follow that this is different, because here I never dealt with numbers. I dealt with words, the description, the discussions. Whereas the discussions earlier on in the first one were preceded by numbers. The numbers were interpreted in words, so that the readers could understand what the findings were.
Yeah, I'm able to distinguish the difference in reporting qualitative data versus reporting quantitative data. And in this case, this is basically qualitative because it doesn't involve numbers.
Yes.
It's basically, yeah.
You can see that the responses were mainly based in the manner in which questions were worded.
Yes.
So take note of how quantitative questions should be worded versus qualitative questions, because later on we will go to how we design a questionnaire. Then you must just put this at the back of our minds so that we can remember, oh, the questions, quantitative or qualitative, were like this. Let's see what should happen when we do a questionnaire. Okay. Now, here it comes again. Developing a data collection instrument. Developing data collection instrument requires us to take into account a number of considerations. And there are a number of phases, and I'm going to go into each one of them one by one, starting from a thorough literature study on the topic under investigation. To me, this means that you cannot design a questionnaire if you did not do literature study, because your questions are mainly based on what you have read. Then, in other words, you understand the topic under research, under investigation.
Sorry to interject. So when you say literature study, are you referring to like a literature review?
Yes, I'm referring to literature review.
Okay.
Yes, and I discourage. You see, I've seen people who say they've been requested by their supervisors to draft questionnaires even before they could finalize chapter 2 or chapter 3, where they do deep literature research. I discourage that, and I'm not against any instruction from any research leader or any supervisor. But I've seen the benefit of doing literature review before you go into the field, because you cannot pose questions when you have not read. Then you're going at tangents. You don't understand the subject. You don't understand what you are researching. But if you read literature and you have got specific objectives that you want to achieve, and if you read everything that is said about those objectives, then you are clear, and you even know the gaps that you have identified under background or under the problem statement become very clear when you read the literature, and you know now what you need to ask in order to collect relevant data. So literature study, a very important aspect when you are to develop a questionnaire as a data collection instrument. And what I'm doing here, I'm going to show you how I focused the research topic, and that is what would inform literature review, and that is what would inform the designing of the data collection instruments, the questionnaire in particular. And I indicate here, I want to focus on the study objectives or the sub-problems. And I read, the main object, this is an extract from that report that I have completed. The main objective of this study is therefore to determine the extent to which vendor culture already practices, in bracket, and has practiced since time memorial, the conservation of natural resources. That is the main objective. In other words, all the sub-problems or the study objectives, sub-objectives or study objectives should support this aim or this main objective. And then for the purpose of this study, the researcher will focus on the following prominent conservation aspects as sub-problems. This statement is coming from chapter 1. And the sub-problems are as follows: cultural perspectives and the conservation of land. How culture supports conservation of land. Cultural perceptions and the conservation of water, because water and land are all natural resources. Cultural perceptions and the conservation of vegetation, plants. Cultural perceptions and the conservation of animals. And lastly, cultural perceptions and human population dynamics, because all of these impact on how the environment is protected and it is conserved or managed. These focus areas should elicit information that will be useful in establishing the extent to which vendor culture contributes to nature conservation. All those 5. Those are the sub-problems or the objectives of the study. And remember, here we want to talk about literature and to see how it gives effect to, or how the questionnaire gives effect to literature and the study topic. Now, when we have sub-problems, then it assists us to focus on the specific sections of the literature. In other words, we must have literature that will assist us to respond to those. Therefore, we want to see if the literature indeed did focus on those sub-problems. And in the literature review, I went to go and make this extract. It says, actually it focused on, 2.1 focused on the Western concept of conservation in Africa. Then, in other words, it put the study into the African context, because the vendor culture is found within the continent of Africa. Later on, I also looked at conservation within the broader African context. Sorry, I made a mistake here. The first one is Western. In other words, internationally, how conservation is implemented. And the second one is within the broader African context, how conservation is practiced in Africa, including in vendor. Then 2.3, then I zoomed into the vendor culture, the context of the vendor culture and conservation. This is very specific to the vendor only. And that is where those research sub-problems or objectives come in there. Now, 1, I said perceptions on the conservation of land. Now here, I've turned it into a subheading of literature review, conservation of land, the other one, conservation of water, conservation of indigenous vegetation, conservation of indigenous animals. All of these are responding to the sub-problems or the study objectives. So in other words, literature study was not a tangent, was in line with what the researcher wanted to achieve. Do you have a question there, Gusisiwe? or do you follow?
Yes, I do have a question. I think you made 5 points, so I see there's no 2.3.5, or did I miss it?
There is 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Okay.
No, I'm saying the subsections, the 2.3.1, the conservation of land. I think there was also a 0.5, 2.3.5.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for noting that. I thought I would, yeah, I have not hidden. I was going to talk about it at a later slide, but I'm very happy. But I'm very happy. I actually wanted this kind of an observation.
Okay.
At the initial inception of the study, and when I did the research proposal, I only had 4 sub-problems. And at the end of the study, when I collected data, there was a lot of information about population dynamics. And it was not then included in the literature. But this is my mistake, because after I found a lot of responses referring to it, I should have come to add it here as one of the sub problems that have been investigated. That gap I saw, and I will make reference to it later on in the slides. But I'm very thankful. This shows that you are indeed following. I'm very grateful. No, I'm very grateful that you have observed that. Because I did not see it before, but I only saw it when I was preparing this presentation. That, oh yes, but why do I have less sub problems? But when I did discuss, there was actually I said I didn't do anything on the literature, but I had it as a sub problem. Then the explanation was it was not initially part of the research proposal, but it came out from data collection.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Let's go on now. Now, number 2, when we develop a questionnaire or a data collection instrument, we also have to do what they refer to as conceptualization. In other words, we identify key variables from literature study that are specifically associated with the phenomena under study. And we've already shown now where the literature study should focus, those subheadings and those sub problems. The aim at this point in the process of the data collection instrument design is to identify all potential factors associated with the phenomena under study. Apart from conceptualization, we generate questions and statements or scales, measurements to be used as measuring tools. And let us look at it, how I've justified that I did look at literature, or there is conceptualization that took place, and questions and statements were generated. Let's just go to the next slide and see if I've responded accordingly. I said that when I focused on the conservation of land, the conservation of water, conservation of indigenous vegetation, the conservation of indigenous animals, when I did literature review on that one, I think that is where I mastered the concept. And indeed, this is what they wanted me to do. And that is what enabled me to put correct questions that are relevant to the topic that is under study. Now, this is your observation now. 2, 3, 5 is your observation.
And that's the one.
Yes, because in the report, we have got a section that reported about human population dynamics. And there on the literature, it was actually lacking. In other words, I'm saying I did not study any in-depth literature on human population. But I know that when you were talking about the conservation of land, it was by people. Conservation of water is by people. Of indigenous is by people, and vegetation and animals is by people. But how people exploded and how they gave pressure on the natural environment did not have a special attention. And here is my comment for today. Human population dynamics variable emerged during data analysis and was included as part of the study sub problems. However, there is an error that literature on this variable was not explored. And this is the contribution that you make. And thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but
Yeah, so basically you made a note of it to make up for not like exploring too much on it in the research proposal.
In my report, I didn't say anything about it. And
Yeah,
I think
reports were not
even
proposed.
even in the final report, you see my promoter also might have missed this error, and we all did not correct it.
Okay.
Yes, maybe even the external examiner had an oversight, so they just passed it. Yes. Now we want to talk about formatting and sequencing questions. Once questions have been developed and reviewed by a group of potential respondents for feedback purposes, researchers then format and sequence the questions. And I want to see what I've done with this. I want to show to you. Okay, first let's hear that pilot study is also something that is very necessary. After you have drafted your first set of questions, you pilot it to identify mistakes. And this is what I'm going to demonstrate to you now. Then this is an extract, and I've got a section under data, under research methodology, the chapter 3, that spoke about the pilot study, the pilot study that was done. The section says a pilot study was carried out over a period of 10 days. No, I didn't. Yeah, there was an error of writing. Over a period of 10 days. That was January. In January. 10 days in January 1998 at Mapate and Haluvimbi villages, respectively, which are villages under the Chivasa area where the study took place. The objectives were to test the interview questionnaires. I had 3 questionnaires. All of them were piloted to see if these do not have errors. And we've read there that we must sequence them correctly, we must identify errors, and these errors must be corrected. And the method of sampling. The objective were to test the interview questionnaires and the method of sampling. Let's see what I said next about this. And these are the problems identified during the pilot study. And there is a small section under pilot study 3.3, which says problems identified during pilot study. It says minor problems were experienced with the compilation of questions. Such problems, which were mainly technical and content related, were rectified before the final survey was carried out. Also, not all the items of the vendor version of the questionnaire measured what the researcher intended to measure. So these are the things that are identified. Such items were subsequently all rephrased in the final schedule or in the final questionnaire. So this is what I've done, Bosisiwe. Having drafted a question, a data collection instrument, I took it to pilot to see if it has got errors or if what comes out of it is indeed relevant to the study. And if I had made mistakes, then indeed I identified these mistakes, and these are the ones that I've listed here. And the strategy was to actually rephrase and to reword to ensure that the correct data is collected in accordance with the way in which questions were worded. Any comment on this, Bosisiwe?
Yeah, I wanted to ask. So when you gave out these questionnaires, né? You gave out questionnaires, né? Or was it one-on-one interviews?
It was one-on-one.
Oh yeah. Okay. So they did not see the errors in the questions. It was you who actually witnessed the errors.
Yes, I'm the one who. Yes, I identified the errors when they were responding. That this does not. The answers are not what I expected. So it means I worded them wrongly. I revised.
Okay. So is it important to always include the section of your research report, the pilot study, the problems identified during the pilot study, and the fact that they were rectified?
Yes, when I report, actually I give an account under your research methodology chapter. You give an account how you implemented the study, how you implemented the research methods. Then this is what was not maybe what might have been written is that a pilot is needed, is important, is sort of, then when I have actually gone to the field to pilot, then I report how I piloted and the outcomes of the pilot, because it shows, it strengthens the case of your studies. It shows that indeed the data that you collected is valid and there is no biasness in the manner in which you collected data.
Okay, all right. Got that.
Yeah, you must, everything that you have done, you must report. Yes, and you see, I will do with you, if needs be, the introductory part of research processes. What does it say? I wanted to say, it shows that research is a step-by-step process. You have got all steps that you have got to follow, and without skipping everything. And you don't have to conduct research to justify your perceptions and to justify what you want to see. You must not anticipate and have results before you go to the field. Otherwise, there's no need for conducting research. You must be objective. If you have got a hypothesis and the outcomes are actually against your hypothesis and they don't confirm, that is a good study. If something says no, if you thought that, you see, earlier on I said I had the perception that population dynamics, population growth in the area of study was a problem. That was my perception. But when I went to people to ask them, they said, no, we don't have a problem with overpopulation here. Then I cannot change the statement and say, no, overpopulation was a problem. Then I am lying. And you see, when somebody goes to conduct research in the same area and he asks the same question, then people are going to say, no, we don't have a problem of overpopulation here. Then people find that my studies said there is overpopulation. Where did I get it? Then I am a lie, in other words. I am a lie. Yes, thank you very much. Let's move now. And now we are going to look at the data collection interviews now as a data collection tool now, and we look at structured to unstructured interviews. Now I want to read this second statement that says let me read all of it. There are various interviewing techniques that fall between the two mentioned extremes of structured to unstructured interviews. These might be typical semi-structured interviews. They might be the focus group interviews, the case study interviews, and many more others. All these can be partly structured and partly unstructured. Sometimes structured questionnaires may be unstructured, may have unstructured. And this we have demonstrated. Those questions, the qualitative and the quantitative questions, all of them come from the same questionnaire. And let me at this moment also introduce you this concept of triangulation. You have had a talk about mixed methods of research. If you have heard that, I want to say that a questionnaire is a very good instrument that assists you to actually implement mixed methods, because in a questionnaire you have structured questions and you can have unstructured questions. So the questionnaire would have these two sets. So let's move now. Your interviews is actually determined on whether you want to go structured, or you want to go unstructured, or you want to go semi-structured. And this is dependent on the purpose of the study, what you want to achieve, the circumstances under which you want to collect data. Now, the authors are saying whether it is structured or it is unstructured, the type of interview is structured or unstructured, actually refers to the extent to which the interviewer takes control over the respondent's frame of reference. when she responds or when she or he responds to the questions. In other words, the way you ask questions, the way in which you conduct the interview, you either give freedom to the respondent to answer in the way that she or he wants, or you controlled. Then, in other words, when you ask, when it is structured, you are the one controlling how responses should be provided. You then did not give that freedom. In other words, you are in charge, you are controlling the point of reference. And they are saying here now that they are aware that you as an interviewer or you as a researcher already have a point of reference because you have got a research topic that you are researching and you've got specific objectives that you want to achieve, but your respondent doesn't even know these things. Then for you to achieve the purpose of your studies, you either give freedom that no, what I want, the data that I want can only be answered if a person is responding in the way that she wants or he wants, or if a person is instructed to respond in a specific way that an interviewer wants. So you can argue that, okay, I'm going structured or I'm going unstructured, depending on what I want to achieve. This is what all these slides is saying here. Now, there is an important statement, and I want to emphasize that. Structured interviews are the interviews that take place when an interviewer, it is when a researcher has visited someone who is a respondent in order to collect data. So in other words, they are structured. The interviewer is usually instructed to ask the questions exactly as they are formulated, only if this interviewer is not a researcher. That is where I said in earlier slides, I made a comment that my questionnaires never had instructions because I am the one who is the drafter of the questionnaires. I'm the one who asked those questions and I'm the one who's collecting this data. So I'm familiar, I know everything. There's no need to write those instructions because I self-conducted interviews and they were face-to-face. Are you still fine up to this point?
Yeah, so therefore your questions were unstructured.
Some were structured because particularly the quantitative one. You see, a person say, I don't know, or I know. A person could only choose one if he earns less than 200 of salary per month. So those were structured. And even if they are open-ended, if I ask them in a specific way, they can still be structured. But if I ask them in a way that a respondent can respond freely in the way that they wish, then it means they are unstructured. They've got freedom of answering in their own way. But if I ask an open-ended question, but I dictate how it should be answered, then I've taken control of the frame of reference of the respondent, and she or he would only answer in a specific way that I want.
Okay.
Yes. Now, let's see if indeed what I've reported, the way I compiled the report and the way I've conducted the research, it indeed showed that my interviews were structured or not. Now, here, face-to-face interviews, this is what I reported in the report. I said the researcher conducted face-to-face interviews when he visited individual households for the purpose of interviewing specific individuals. The use of other approaches such as mailed questionnaires would cause problems because the mailing system in rural areas is not reliable. In other words, I was justifying why face-to-face interviews were necessary. Further, since most of the respondents were illiterate, they would not be able to read and write. Therefore, if I had mailed questionnaires, they would not even answer because they could not write, they could not read. So I was justifying why it was necessary for me to meet. You must remember, if I meet my respondents, a person went to school, a person who did not go to school, they will be able to participate in the study. And therefore, this gives me an opportunity to interview. It means my people have got equal opportunity of being included in the study. By the way, I used random sampling design. And if we go to the sampling design, I will use this as an example on how I got people to participate in the interview. So I justified that indeed I conducted interviews, and it was structured. I think it's structured to unstructured, because in some questions, you would remember the question that I asked the traditional healers. They gave me a lot of stories. They gave me a lot of information in the way that they wanted. So it might have been structured to unstructured, but where I asked them to just indicate yes or no, or a number, a quantitative number, that might have been structured. Can we move?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Now, the structured interviews would be typically yes or no responses to questions, or responses to open-ended questions, where respondents are allowed to think within. Yeah, here. Respondents can be allowed to think within specific parameters before they respond. How would you describe your work environment? This is structured, although it is open-ended. This is the distinction between the unstructured and the structured. Even if it is open-ended here, it is still structured. Yeah. Now let's look at how some of the questions were done, and how I did it in the questionnaire. This is how I reported. One of the objectives of the study was to determine the cultural attitudes and practices of the Bavenda. And thus, most of the questions were open-ended, and only a few closed-ended questions were included. Yeah, very, very qualitative.
Yeah, I see that it was now both structured and unstructured.
Yeah, yes, qualitative now and quantitative. And this is how a questionnaire assists you to include to do qualitative and the quantitative study. You see, the mixed methods comes together handy when you do your questions. Yeah, the use of open-ended questions has become common in contemporary research, but the benefits of such questions need to be addressed here, because they present their own challenges. They've got challenges, but they also do have some advantages. You see, if I've already indicated that if it was not face-to-face, sorry, no. By the way, here we're talking about open-ended. Open-ended allows you to be given more explanations. So the study is qualitative, and particularly when you're studying cultural perspectives, cultural behavior, you want quality, you want more descriptions and more information. So open-ended have assisted here in gathering data of qualitative nature. Let's just go down and see if there's another example that I gave. Now, I'm going to go to situation during the face-to-face interview. What happens during the interview between the respondent and the interviewer? Now, here there is an emphasis of congruency, such as the age is an important aspect, gender is an important aspect, ethnic group is important, language is important. How old you are will determine your interaction and the perception and the responses. It impacts on all these things. And I've taken this into account, and I want to make examples on how I took this into account. I actually want to start with language now. And under the research methodology, there is a section that dealt with the questionnaire construction, which talks about the interview schedule. It says, because the researcher took all these factors into consideration, and because the targeted respondents were all Tshivenda speaking, he translated all the questionnaires into Tshivenda. This is the congruency in terms of language. And I was just showing an example that I've taken these things into an account. And the one most important aspect is Tshivenda. Remember here, I cannot write my report in English. And therefore my questionnaires were written here, are presented in English. But in actual fact, I had translated them into Tshivenda. So I had the Tshivenda questionnaires that I used. Then I had to again make sure that the same is also presented in English when I finalize the reporting here. That is when you're dealing with people whose education level is, is low. And culture is so important. You cannot go to your blacks, to the Venda-speaking people, and demand that you need to interview them in English. They're going to be surprised. If there's somebody who speaks English and they volunteer, then it's another matter. But when I am Muvenda and they are Tshivenda speaking, I prefer to do it into Tshivenda. And if it was another cultural grouping and I was collecting data from there, I would have even requested an interpreter, somebody to go with me, so that if they speak Northern Sotho, if they speak Tonga, then somebody should assist me to ensure that I don't bombard these people with foreign language to an extent that I don't even collect data that I need. Any comment there, Busisiwe?
Yeah, because I was gonna ask, like, what if you're doing a research report in a community where there's multiple languages being spoken? So are you gonna need like an interpreter for all those different languages? And then in terms of reporting it on your research report, how are you gonna like put it?
I think I've never come across that, but my understanding is that even before I go into the population where I'm sampling, I must actually, you see here, when I was in literature, and I knew that it is only about the Bavenda and therefore the Venda culture. So these people, for me, all of them speak Tshivenda. So if I were to go to Soweto,
yeah, like Soweto,
then the cultures now must play a big role. That I'm Venda, but there are Tongas, Pedi Sotho, Venda Sotho, Xhosa, Baka, and whoever, English, Africans, and everybody there. Then I think it is important to consider all those languages that if I don't speak all of those languages, then it's better to find somebody so that we can close the gap, that we don't leave a person because we don't speak his language. And that is also discrimination. It's not good. It's unfair.
Yeah.
And the study would be biased.
Okay.
Now, I want to read something to you here. Because the interviewer is an uninvited guest, researchers must be careful not to create a situation where the interviewer has to overstay his or his welcome. And the people, there are a number of feelings, how many, how long an interview should be, and others are saying maybe 20 minutes, others are saying and it could be stretched to 30 and even 45 minutes. I forgot how much mine was, but I think my interviews might have even gone up to 45 minutes, and I was enjoying this. And I make a comment here that it is also fair to mention that if the respondent is unable to answer most of the questions, the interview session would be even shorter. That is my comment. Now, let us look at some the outcomes, what I've reported about staying long or staying short and so on. I reported, again, this was in chapter 3 in under research methodology. The report says, another challenge was actually meeting respondents. There were instances where people were busy when the interviewer arrived, but the villagers obviously did not regard this as a problem because none of them refused to be interviewed when the interviewer asked them to participate in the interview. I think I was very lucky because it is common that people can even refuse to be interviewed. And then it delays the extent to which the researcher succeeds or in the completion of the research project. During the course of the visits, some homesteads were found to be empty. When this happened, the interviewer moved on to sample the next homestead. Now, this is to show you why I justify what I've done, and to show that there was no biasness. I did not intentionally skip a homestead in terms of random sampling, because I had a specific way in which I was sampling. If I sample village 1, maybe I would skip 1 or 2 and then go to the third, skip 1 or 2, go to the third. Then when I could not follow what I earlier proposed, it means I had to adapt to the existing environment in the field. Because what is good with qualitative research, social research, is that it is adaptive. And although it is subjective, it allows you to be flexible in the field. When the proposed research method is not implementable, you can adapt another one to ensure that you collect data. So this is what has expired. The interviewer needed to exercise patience when interviewing leaders, because villagers always visit them to settle community matters. In other words, when you visited the leaders, you could wait there. Before you could even start interviewing him, he would be having people, so you must wait there. This has to do with the time that the interview takes. So before you can even start, you have to wait. This problem was, to some extent, obviated when the researcher decided to make appointments with leaders a week in advance. So that the leader would say, no, at this time, I'll dedicate this time to the researcher so and so who is coming on this date at this time. I will wait for him at this place. The researcher found that traditional leaders were mostly only available to be interviewed during weekends, which were not always free of interferences. As I said, the subjects will always visit them to settle matters. It was during weekends that the researcher was obliged to attend village gatherings in which he was introduced and welcomed. You see, this is how the protocol is. Even if you are saying you're going to collect data today, they will say, no, first attend our Imbizo or our Chibizo or Koro. Or even when you are gaining entry, they will say, okay, we will introduce you that there's going to be so and so who will be working with the people, with the communities, with the residents, so that they don't give you problems when you enter the homesteads. Although this procedure took up a lot of extra time, there it is now. It ultimately benefited the researcher because it ensured that the cooperation of the villagers, which was vital for the success of the project. It ensured the cooperation of the villagers. Because when you were introduced at the Koro, at the Imbizo, at the gathering, everybody knows that, oh, this person will come. So when he comes, then he is not chased away, he is welcomed. It also helped the researcher to develop relations with important role players such as administrators and traditional leaders, and ensured his security. We know this researcher amongst us, people, please be respectful, please assist him when he comes. It also meant that he did not have to introduce himself anew every time he visited individual households. This custom of the Koro is accepted as a normal part of tribal life among the Bavenda. And this is what has benefited this researcher. And Bosisi, any comment? That is when I was following our traditional customs.
Yeah, no, I see you did definitely follow through with the traditional customs, and it also helped the villagers to warm up to you, and they felt more comfortable in actually engaging in the interviews. Just from you having attended the gatherings.
Yeah. So now you see this type of reportings is important because this is what contributes to the study. Books of research methodology, books on research processes. There are many of them that are not written in Africa. They are written from overseas. We do have some that are written in Africa, but they might have not written in Chivenda or might not have been written by Chivenda-speaking people. But look, you could contribute as an author. How research should be conducted, how cultural values are so important in ensuring the success of the report. So this might have been one of the contributions that has been there from the study. So it is important.
Sorry, so I see that approach is also important when it comes to such research reports.
Yes,
and
yes.
conducting these studies. It's also important in how you like the approach, your approach style.
Yes. Now there is something that I also want to share with you here now. In this slide, if you go to bullet number 3, the author has said, never sit first, as you might accidentally choose to sit on the respondent's chair, which may irritate the respondent throughout the interview. Now, I say no, because I know our culture. According to the Tshivenda culture, you have to sit as soon as you enter the household to show a sign of respect. And there is no chair that you can sit on. We have got these huts are surrounded by mud benches. You see around a, do you come from a rural area? Put this way.
No, I don't.
No, but if you go to rural areas in the north there, our huts are surrounded by some structures that appear to be seats. And when you get inside there, you sit on that. We call it guba. Then you must immediately, when you get inside somebody's household, you don't stand. You must find something to sit on, just to sit. If they don't want you to sit where you are sitting, they will give you something. They will say, no, sit there, sit there. They will give you instructions. So why I'm saying I put this statement in here, I wanted to show that I don't agree with anything that has been written in a book, because if it is not applicable to my culture, I must show that my culture does not accept this. It differs.
Yeah.
So you can see that this book that I read from was written by a person whose culture, you see, particularly the whites, you stand there. That is why when you speak to elders, even in the white community, amongst the white community, you stand up. You cannot sit. But in my culture, you cannot speak to an elder standing. They will deal with you, and they will even chase you out. You cannot even conduct interviews. So this is what congruency means. Congruency means that align yourself with the culture of the people who are your respondents, so that you are acceptable. Don't threaten them. And remember, you are an uninvited guest. Every time you want their cooperation, you want support, you want them to contribute to the study. So if you are attendant, and if you don't become subjective, you don't accept the customs and rules, then you must as well not go and collect data from there.
Yeah, so you must just, it's basically important to humble yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. Now, and there is something that is very, very important. The flow of items. Here they've listed a lot of things, but I just want to go to the second last bullet. At the same time, it is important to group items into coherent categories. Remember, you are designing a questionnaire, and these are general considerations. They are saying at the same time, group what belongs together in one section and separate that which does not belong together into different categories. And I'm going to demonstrate how I've done it. When I was doing a questionnaire, the researcher also grouped the questions relating to the 5 sub-problems which he had identified earlier into 5 separate sections, which were cultural perceptions and conservation of land. You see, in each of the questionnaire, all these 4 were there, except the last one of cultural perceptions. I had a section that was looking at conservation of land. All the questions relating to land was asked there. Now, the questions relating to water was in the second one. The questions relating to the vegetation, indigenous vegetation, was number 3. And number 4 was the questions that related to animals. So this is how I structured all the questionnaires. And don't forget that I did this for all the 3 sets of questionnaires. Each questionnaire was structured like this. All the 3. And this is what the authors are recommending. And they say this actually avoids confusion from from your respondents. You cannot ask you are asking a question about animals. You jump and go and ask about land. You go and jump and ask about water. You go and ask about any plants. No, you better finish something about plants. Go to animals, finish. Go to land, finish. And then go to water and finish. That is what is being advised here. And I do agree with them, because even if I did not have a discussion on these specific categories, on how they should be arranged, and I had done it, and I see that it is in line with what literature says. Let's move. Now, the other thing that happened is the researcher accordingly designed the 3 types of questionnaires for 3 selected sectors of the community: traditional leaders, traditional healers, and ordinary villagers. And these are in appendices 1 to 4. And I think we've already spoken about these. Specific questions were asked to each of these sectors. Therefore, you cannot ask something about medicine to any. Oh, by the way, I did not ask anything about. No, I didn't ask a lot about medicine to villagers. But I asked a lot about medicine to traditional healers, because these are the people that use medicine. And to traditional leaders, I asked their role as leaders, leadership, because I know that they are in charge of the community, they are in charge of the villages. And to ensure that conservation is happening, then they are to behave as role models. Traditional leaders were, for an example, asked questions related to the role they play in their position of leadership. That is when I'm talking about traditional leaders. Such questions could not be asked to either traditional healers or villagers, for they would not be able to provide relevant answers. This is what I was justifying, the separation of the different types of questions in accordance with the 3 different sectors. Similarly, most of the questions asked to traditional healers were based on them being medicinal practitioners, the role that leaders and villagers could not fulfill. On the other hand, the majority of questions asked to villagers could also apply to traditional leaders and traditional healers. Because what a villager knows is what a traditional healer knows, and it is what a traditional leader knows, because he leads those people in any way. That is why in some sections, similar questions were asked to all 3 sectors, because when it is known that they are familiar with this subject, there was no reason why I couldn't ask them similar questions. Let me stop here, Ebuzisiwe, so that you can come in. And this is my last slide, by the way.
Yeah, because I actually wanted to pose a question as to how you based your 3 different questionnaires in terms of the different types of people in the community, like the traditional healers, the leaders, and the villagers. So now I see how you distinguished, how you were able to distinguish your questionnaires.
Yes, it's just, if I come to your family, you have got father, you have got mother, you have got children. Eh?
Yeah.
Father should be asked the father questions, because he has got a role that he plays that nobody plays in the family.
Yeah.
A child also plays a role that parents don't play. The mother plays the role that that the father and the children don't play. She cooks, she cleans them, she takes them to school, she does a lot of things. You see, so I used common sense because I had assumptions, and this helped me to structure the questions.
Yeah.
And even the literature study should assist, because from the literature, I should hear somebody saying that chiefs or indunas or whatever do this in terms of protecting the land or animals or plants. And I should hear somebody saying that in Chivenda culture, traditional healers are the ones who do this. They are the ones who are used by the chiefs to actually perform Udzivera Shango ritual, the one that is to protect the land. So I should have read things that are related. That is why they said when you craft questions, you should have read literature so that you can do conceptualization. You understand the subject under research.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, now this is my final slide. And today I've done very well, Lindiwe. It's just 2:15. Lindelwa. But Busisiwe, it is good time to discuss now how we will, while we're waiting for Lindelwa. Lindelwa, you can interject when you are ready.
I'm ready, Dr. Korombi. Should I stop the recording now?
No, let me first, if I discuss generally with her, or I give her
let's stop the recording then.
Okay, but can she make final comment on the presentation before you stop recording?
Yes, they are welcome to make final comments.
Final comments, Busisiwe?
Yes, your presentation in terms of your slides were very well constructed and highly insightful. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to ask, are you gonna share them in any way moving forward? Like maybe send us an email of the presentation in PowerPoint form or something, just so we can look back on it.
Lindelwa will answer that one. Let's hold it for now. When she makes closing remarks, she will respond to that one. You have got a partner. Who is that, Lindelwa? There is another one who has joined. May I also offer?
Magoma. Hey, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name.
Yes, you totally butchered it.
I'm so sorry. I hate butchering people's names.
Okay, my apologies.
Because I'm reading it in Nguni.
And it's actually Venda, hey?
Magoma, yes. And why didn't you make a comment? But Mope, you are very much unfair.
No, I'm sorry. I came in late. I saw this invitation earlier during the day, but unfortunately I joined another session. And then I realized, no, man, this is not the same one. So I quickly rushed to my emails to check this one. And I just arrived too late. I would have also commented a lot. I'm from a royal family. Hey,
are you from a royal family?
I am, and what you said about traditional leaders, but it's fine. Anyway, I think I kind of understood the last things that you were talking about at the end in terms of questionnaire, but I didn't get the whole glimpse of what you were talking about from the beginning. But maybe if they share the presentation, then I can just scroll through your presentation and just understand what's happening when it comes to questionnaire constructions.
Yeah, you see, I want in inverted commas, and I want Lindelwa to also respond to this when she makes a closing remark. You are allowed to engage me outside this session, and Lindelwa will advise if I can have a one-on-one with you on this topic, or we can summarize it somewhere outside. She will advise if it is allowed in terms of our policy.
Okay, thank you so much.
But you are allowed to make any further comment. Don't be afraid of us. We are very open, and then please just use any. You can abuse me if you want, but in a very professional way.
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Okay. If there are no other further questions, let me hand over to Lindelwa to make concluding remarks. She will also respond to whether we can send this presentation to you, or I can still engage you outside. Then you can see where the presentation comes from and how I reached this last presentation, these slides.
Thank you, fellow researchers. Dr. Korombi is available for consultation one-on-one on whatever aspect of your research project that you are doing. You can email me or email him directly. I will put up his email address on the chat so that you can access it, and we can, or he can schedule an appointment, either telephonic or through Teams, or even respond to you on email. And then secondly, we will share the recording as soon as it has been edited. And if Dr. Korombi avails the slides, we can also share them separately. So it will be up to Dr. Korombi to email me the slides. Once he is satisfied that we can share them, I will post them to the two of you. And as I've indicated earlier on the chat, We also have a YouTube channel for Gauteng region. So if you've missed a previous session, you will find some of the previous recordings uploaded there on the Gauteng region YouTube channel.